Welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum. I'd like to thank again the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes the show happen. Our guest in this segment is Mike Wheatly. We're going to be talking about voting reform, electoral reform, trying to find a voting system that does a better job for us than our current system. And Mike is quite an expert on this. And we're going to start off by talking about vote splitting, strategic voting, and leadnow.ca.
Yes. Well, the first thing a lot of people need to understand is that we don't have one election in Canada. We'll talk federally for now. We have, the last time we had 308 separate elections. And what we're coming up with next is 338 separate elections. And to look at issues of vote splitting and strategic voting, you have to look at it one election, one riding at a time. Each is individual. The political parties have been terribly abusing the language, abusing their references to vote splitting and strategic voting. They've been using very simplistic interpretations of vote splitting and strategic voting and making comments to the public designed just to serve their own political purposes.
Can you give us an example?
Yes, I can. The election in Oak Bay Gordon Head, now this is provincial, but the NDP during that election were very critical of the Green Party for splitting the vote. As it turned out, if we're going to look at it based on the results of that election, it ended up being a three-way race. If you're going to talk about vote splitting, you would have to assume that the party that got the least vote was the one that was doing the vote splitting, because the nature of vote splitting is that people are deprived of an opportunity to choose between the two favorites. And the results of the Oak Bay Gordon Head riding election, so 40% for the Green Party, 29% for the Liberals, and 28% for the NDP.
Okay.
So if you're going to say somebody was splitting the vote, it would have been the NDP that were doing that.
But the whole issue of, I mean, because the system doesn't work well, I think. So is there a way to fix this up?
It's worse than just doesn't work well. First past the post is a dysfunctional system. Anytime you have more than two candidates, it falls apart. The problem with it is it allows the least popular candidate to win a contest if there are more than two candidates.
The least popular?
It allows the least popular candidate to win.
Okay, how's that?
How's that? Well, let's take an example. You have, borrowing from Nanaimo.
Okay.
You have to start off, you have two options. You can build a bridge to the island, or you can have a ferry running to the island.
Okay.
75% of the population wants a bridge.
Okay.
25% wants a ferry. Obviously, 75, 25, the people who want a bridge should get it. But then you have a popular position, people who want a bridge, so you'll get other candidates running. So you could have three candidates
With
running.
three different bridge proposals.
Three different bridge proposals.
Right. And
one group wants a green bridge,
right,
blue bridge, green, blue,
orange,
red bridge.
Yeah, okay.
Red, green, blue.
Right.
So now you have a four-way split.
Right.
If the people who want a ferry manage to get 25% support, they win.
That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so what you're saying is this often happens in our elections.
Yes.
Yes.
Anytime you have more than two candidates, first past the post is dysfunctional.
Okay. So do you want to talk about strategic voting and lead now, or do you want to talk about how to fix up that, what we can do to fix that up?
Okay, I'll go with fixing how to fix that system. It's best to think of electoral reform, which is what you need, as a progressive thing. The first, most fundamental electoral reform we could have is the use of a preferential ballot. That's where you select your most preferred candidate on the ballot. You then look at the candidates who are left on the ballot, and again, you select your most preferred from those that are left.
So you vote 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say.
You can number them. You can do that on a grid, on a paper ballot. You can do it on a computer.
Right.
Works very easily.
Okay.
And in many ways, it's easier to vote with a preferential ballot than it is with a first-past-the-post ballot, because you don't have to deal with issues of vote splitting, strategic voting.
Okay.
In many
so
ways,
you
it's
vote
simpler.
1, 2, 3, 4, and I think what you're saying is, in the end, the candidate who really represents more than 50% of the voters will win.
Yes. Now,
Even if he or she is not their first choice, at least they'd prefer to see that person than this person.
yes.
And this person will win under first past the post.
So in the case of the ferries and the bridges,
Yeah.
you would have 26% for the ferries. You would have the other three options, votes
25,
distributed
25,
between
20,
them. The least popular option, the least popular color of bridge, would be excluded, and those votes would be moved to one of the other two bridge colors. Then, again, you have no winner if it's a three-way split, so the votes for the two bridge colors would be consolidated. And
Now,
then,
I agree with you. I think that's important. Now, I prefer proportional voting systems, but certainly what you're talking about is an improvement.
it's also
over
an
what we
essential
have
part
now.
of a good proportional system. A preferential ballot moves a great deal of power from politicians and parties to voters. A proportional electoral system redistributes the power fairly, hopefully, between parties. But by itself, it does nothing to transfer power from the political parties and the voters, from the political parties and the politicians to the voters. If all you do is implement a proportional system, the only thing you do is change the distribution of power between the parties. You don't transfer any power to the voters.
Can you have a preferential voting system and a proportional voting system working together?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, you start with the preferential ballot. That should be used for everything. If you keep the representational system we have now, where you have single riding districts, have 338 of them coming up,
Right.
then what you would have is called alternative vote. It's a particular case of single transferable vote where you only have single member districts. And for alternative vote, or for single transferable vote, it's essential that you use a preferential ballot. So the first most basic electoral reform would be to adopt a preferential ballot under our existing representational system. It doesn't give you good proportionality. It prevents the worst abuses of our electoral system. The next step is to look at achieving proportional representation between the parties. And it's important to understand that that is simply divvying the power up between the parties more fairly. One way of doing that is with, again, single transferable vote. Voters
Or mixed
selected
member
that in
proportional.
BC.
Yeah. Or MMP, the system used
Or
in Germany.
MMP.
Yeah.
Now, single transferable vote, it's essential that you use a preferential ballot.
Yeah. But you can use a preferential ballot for MMP as well, can't
With
you?
MMP, you double the size of your single member districts. That frees up a bunch of seats which are used to provide proportionality between the parties. You want to use a preferential ballot and alternative vote in those single member districts. When you see a situation where they've adopted MMP, but they haven't adopted preferential ballots for those single member districts, as they've done in New Zealand, you have a situation where the political parties have decided that they need a better distribution of power, but they aren't really serious about transferring any of their power to the voters.
But we could take the power to create the list of, like, let's say within the Green Party could run 10 people, let's say. But we, as voters, could pick the 2 or 3 or 4 who are going to get elected instead of the party picking it. Would that be...
with the voters being able to have more say on the party list in an MMP system, then yes, you are giving voters a bit more power, but not much. The real change in the real transfer of power comes with the preferential ballot used in the single-member districts. The interesting thing is single transferable vote doesn't give you the same degree of proportionality that MMP does, but that lack of proportionality is not so important because single transferable vote with the preferential ballot transfers so much power to the voters. The parties no longer have the power. You don't have to worry about which party has a few extra seats.
Okay. You wanted to talk about Lead Now, and you also wanted to talk about electoral reform after the fall federal election. So, and we've only got like 2 minutes left.
Well, as I've said, the parties abused the concept of vote splitting and strategic voting for their own ends. Lead Now is attempting to do something very different, which might be thought of as strategic voting. They're referring to it as cooperative voting, and it'll be very different from anything the parties are either promoting or complaining about. Lead Now has been collecting contact information for Canadians who are interested in change for 3-4 years now. They're in the process of contacting those people and confirming that they are willing to support cooperative voting. They will then select ridings in Canada that are swing ridings. They will do very high quality single riding polling to find out what the likely possible vote split is between the candidates. They will then consult with those people who have said they wish to vote cooperatively, and they will, as best they can, their intention is to select the one candidate who will be the best competitor for the Conservative candidate in a select number of
So
swing
the idea
ridings.
is to beat Stephen Harper.
Yes.
Instead of splitting the vote against him.
And we know we need electoral reform. The one party which has said it will have nothing to do with electoral reform is the Conservative Party. If we want electoral reform, we have to replace the Conservatives.
Mike, we're out of time. Thank you so much for a very interesting discussion about a very, very important subject. And thank you for watching this segment of Citizens.